Hello, everybody. Angela Merkel has rolled out a catalogue of 89 policies against the far right, so she's shown us her instruments, so to say. I have already made a video about the policies that are supposed to be carried out by our Ministry of the Interior. This video will be about the Ministry of other things conducted by the Ministry of Defense, the Foreign Ministry, the Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection, as well as the Ministry for Work and Social Affairs. There will be more videos. There will be, I think, 2 more videos about this, and I hope you enjoy it. Department for Foreign Relations is supposed to do the following things. 27. The expansion of the existing international networks for science diplomacy. Deutsche Akademischer Austauschdienst, the German Academic Exchange Service. I'm not sure what they are doing. The Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. I'm also not quite sure what they are doing. And they are all supposed to cooperate in the area of right-wing extremism, racism, and anti-Semitism. I assume prevention, but they have not used the word. Number 28, diversity strategies in the external culture and education politics, participation and diversity as a persistent core and cross task of the external culture and education politics. Remember that this is about the ministry that is operating the embassies, so they are not really supposed to do much anyway, and they are now following a diversity strategy abroad. They are telling other nations that they should become more Muslim. 29 is the work on the history of colonialization in the international context. Bullet point 1 is the development of shared school books. With a target region Africa, and in the bracket says target region Africa and Georg Eckert Institute. I have no idea what the Georg Eckert Institute is and what it does. They are supposed to write school books, and this is somehow to be divvied out by our foreign ministry, right? And the second bullet point is the expansion of the voluntary programs with a target region of Africa. So they want to send people around and tell them that everything that's crap there is a result of some colonialism. I also find it deeply insulting that Germans who have barely any colonial history try to point their fingers on the British and on the French and on others and tell them that the entire colonial history is just defined by its lowest points, because this is how we are taught this affair in schools. This is the case everywhere in the Western world, and it should be challenged, right? The life expectancy has increased tremendously since white folks, since Europeans arrived on the shores of many places. They have taught people to read and to write. They have given people access to medication and so forth. So defining this entire episode by a few battles where, yes, admittingly, a lot of innocent people died in early death, they try to wash away the accomplishments, and that a lot of people actually lived longer, far longer, and far healthier because the Europeans arrived in those shores, and because they traded, because a lot of colonialism was this evil capitalism, where you actually exchange goods peacefully, and where everybody volunteers to join in, right? So this is demonized beyond pale, and Germans who had some share in it, but not the largest one, spending so much money in the propaganda of demonizing something that their fellow Europeans did has bad taste. Number 30 is projects for combating right-wing extremism, racism, anti-Semitism, and cultural program work abroad. Bullet point 1 is additional funds for cultural program work abroad, whatever that means. Bullet point 2 is international youth exchange programs. So this means we have a few of those that the government pays people's habitation, like some dormitories, student dorms, stuff like that. And, some pupils are expected to go to an American high school or to a different university while they study just for some period of time. And this is supposed to enlighten us in one way or another. And I think this has a religious connotation. You don't read an advisory book on how to apply for a job without the mention of the importance of a stay outside your country. And that means that these people believe you become enlightened for being just somewhere else. Moving around is a religion in itself at this point. And if you look at it in practice, you see a hell lot of people who actually ditch their studies while they are abroad, and they are just boozing, they're partying. And this is supposedly sending them off to a higher level of morality, metropolitanism, open-mindedness and everything, and makes them superior to all these lower people who cannot afford to move around and to waste so much time without earning money. Bullet point 3 is strengthening the education and dissemination of morals on German schools abroad. My problem with that is morals are do's and don'ts. They are instructions, so to say. And that's actually what your parents should do, right? This is really not what the government is supposed to do. The bullet point 4 of number 30 is a project of the Goethe Institute and Institute for Relations Abroad, Foreign Relations, IFA. And it doesn't specify what these institutions are supposed to do, but I assume they get more money. And below that it says an expansion of international memorial travel arrangements. Number 31 is strategic communication abroad, dealing with disinformation and conspiracy theory mythologies from the right, between populism, anti-Semitism, and racism. More additional funds of the Germany abroad for. I've never heard of this, the Germany abroad for Deutschland im Ausland Mittel, DIA. Number 32, study about racism and exclusion patterns in foreign cultures and educational politics, and proposals for action. Number 33 is Centers for International Cultural Education at the Goethe Institutes at home in our country, under the cooperation of the Commissioner of the Federal Government for Culture and Media. Yes, we do have another sinecure office for culture and media. Supposedly our culture cannot live without a commissioner who is probably the cousin or the best friend of somebody in a ministerial office. And without that commissioner, we couldn't have media and culture, because, we are savages. The following points are supposed to be carried out by the Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection. Number 34 is amendments of the penalty code. The bullet point 1 is crafting proposals for the fight against so-called enemy lists, or in brackets death lists, there's /outing, but I'm not quite sure what that means. Then there is a second bullet point which says crafting proposals for the prosecutability of insults. And insults are already an offense in the German penalty code. It shouldn't be, because everybody can claim to be offended. It is not definable. Everything everybody can be submitted to some legal process. It also means that somebody who has a better relationship with the judges will have the upper hand in a given conflict, because he can claim everything is offending him, and if the judge feels he wants somebody else punished from it and stripped of his financial resources, maybe even his liberty, then that can be done. 3 is an assessment of additional needs for the combating of cyber stalking and the improvement of the protection of local politicians and civil societal activists. So they mean activists and local politicians. The local politicians are just pawns. They want an additional protection for their own people, and of course they are presenting to the public those who don't have bodyguards of their own. But of course they mean, particularly because they talk about the internet, they mean actually themselves. They want more protection for themselves, for the left-wing in group, and they want to be protected, among other things, against cyber stalking. What is stalking? Stalking used to be a hunting terminology, and later it was expanded to, creeps or people who are just terribly heartbroken, who did not behave well because they were too emotional, who could not let go of their former girlfriends. And now because this is so difficult, this is so gray, how much contact is actually a form of harassment. There's this gray area, and this is this thing they try to zoom in. So we are actually not talking about highly emotional people, about stalkers, about people who may have mental issues. We are talking about politics here, remember. So cyber stalking is possibly too much contact with people who disagree. So they don't want you to talk others out of their stupid ideas. And this again is a criminalization of a democratic process, because you actually have to ask people into a conversation, be it in the street, if you distribute leaflets, if you get into communication with somebody, to organize any majority for any policy you ever wish for. You always have to talk to people who disagree with you. And if you criminalize that, you actually criminalize all opposition, all potential opposition. Number 35, the federal government wishes additional education about right-wing extremism, racism, and anti-Semitism in the judicial branch at the German Judges Academy, and an additional funding of projects of the German Institute for Human Rights. Number 36 is a rephrasing of Article 3 of our Constitution, replacing the word race. This article literally just says people should not be judged on their race, or should not have any disadvantages or advantages because of their race. And this should be enough. And for my taste, it's actually already too much. But okay, I can kind of accept that that as it is a part of the Constitution. What I really don't want to see there is that fight against racism becomes a part of the Constitution. But this is what they want. They claim to be about language and about stuff that, few people actually care about so much. And in reality, they want to claim that whatever the shit they want right now is as important as voting, is as important as freedom of speech, as important as freedom of assembly, as everything that you associate with democracy. And Article 3 is, at the very beginning of the Constitution, so they want their finances to be placed even before elections are mentioned in the Constitution, right? And I'm staunchly opposed to that. And number 37 is the practice-oriented research in the judiciary and in law schools concerning rights and racism. Number 38 is assessing whether dealing with the National Socialist history can be integrated into the legal training of the lawyers and judges, I assume. and if that would require a change in the German judicial law, meaning I think that's the law, or judge law as a direct translation. I think that's the law that establishes who may become judge under what conditions. I don't know for what court, I assume. Whether that is somehow to be amended in order to integrate a history class, I assume, with the focus on National Socialism. And number 39 is strengthening the support and protection of victims. Bullet point 1 is the creation of a central platform for the protection of victims of criminal offenses. The second bullet point is an expansion of hardship provisions for victims of terrorist offenses and extremist attacks on material damage. That really makes no sense. I have no idea what that means, sorry. Bullet point 3 is the extension of actions of the Commissioner for Victims. I'm not kidding. There's another sinecure office just to play the victimhood Olympics. I assume there's a commissioner for victims, and his actions or activities are to be expanded with regards to financing the networking and information exchange of the victim protecting actors. There are supposed to be conventions or meetings and an exchange of best practice with the victim consultation centers and the victim commissioners of the individual states. Number 40 is the extension of the legal deadline to 6 months in the general equal treatment law. That's the anti-discrimination law, and this is how it's usually referred to in the media. The legal deadline for challenging potential discrimination on the courts is to be extended for half a year. Number 41, a study for the law, paragraph 46 of the penalty code, particularly sentence or section 2, sentence 2 of it, that is about the measurements, the penalty range a judge can apply it to a certain offense. And it is saying that there can be aggravation of the punishment if the motivation were racist, xenophobic, or had other human despising thinking behind it, right? Human despising, menschenverachtend, that's no joke. So they assume that people just hate all human beings. Anyway, so that's law. And it says here that this will even be changed to also include anti-Semitic motivations. That's an afterthought. Quite obviously, protecting Jews is only an afterthought, and it is only then used to justify that they basically don't want any criticism of Muslims. And insults are already a very vague category, and then insults are a punishable crime. And if you add that racist motivations and so forth, then you can imagine that this has a lasting effect on how we live with one another in the future. The study is supposed to be an aid for the courts and the prosecutors. Number 42. The use of racism, sensible language, and an examination in how far it is standardized or unified terminology with regards to racism can be used in legal texts. The Federal Ministry for Labor and Social Affairs is supposed to do number 43, which is the creation of a not specified action emphasis with the title Fighting Extremism, the workplace, strengthening the workplace in change. And it is to happen in the framework of the ministries support program integration through qualification. The Federal Ministry for the Defense is to conduct the steps 44 to 46 of the catalogue, and 44 is the expansion of the application range from 4 years to 8 years of the law 55, paragraph 55, section 5 of the Soldier law book. And I think this is about dismissal protection, like you are stripped down from your workplace protection laws a bit. This is because our elites become nervous right now. They think there is a right-wing putsch happening because they behave so offensively towards anybody to the right of Karl Marx that they fear violence, and this is just a segment of society that necessarily has arms or access to arms. And they are likewise as nervous about our police. This is not intrinsic. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with our armed forces or with the police. It's just that our elites behave so badly that they notice that there is some pushback going on, and they clamp down on people who have access to arms first, of course. Additionally, there should be instruments in the area of simple and still legal disciplinary procedures, in brackets the doubling of the limitation, the statutes of limitation for the prosecution of misdemeanors in simple disciplinary procedures up to 12 months, and a doubling of the highest possible disciplinary penalty up to 2 monthly gross salaries, and an expansion of the applicability of the disciplinary court verdicts for the demotion of a military serviceman. Number 45 is a study to measure the influence of political extremism within the Bundeswehr, our army, and an assessment of the causes and the extent of extremist attitudes within the members of the army, and the development of target-oriented instruments for the prevention and for political education. Number 46 is the strengthening of the cooperation of MAD, or BA MAD, as they abbreviate it here. That is a secret service that is looking into the thoughts of our military men. And there's also an equivalent for everybody else that's called the Verfassungsschutz. We do have a secret service that is looking into our thoughts and is branding people as extremists if they supposedly say something that goes too much against what the government likes to hear. Extremism is not well defined in any meaningful way. So we have services that are surveying citizens who have not committed any crimes. And MAD is the military side of this, and the Verfassungsschutz, BFV, abbreviated here, is the civil equivalent of it. And they are supposed to cooperate with one another and also with the BKA, that is the German equivalent of the FBI, so the federal police. And they are supposed to do this through a better networking in the area of extremism defense and the development of cooperation and coordination formats within the framework of the existing law. I must say that I'm not quite sure if the phrase geltendes Recht, existing law, does actually mean existing law, because it has become a phrase that's just simply thrown around without any true meaning. It can mean legality in general, so within the framework of general legality they want to do it, but that could mean little more than a lip service, if anything. That was it for today, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.